When did you realize it was time to get your life together? Saturday morning, I awoke early, eager to surprise my gorgeous stripper fiancée. We had recently moved into our first apartment together, and thanks to her successful career, we had some extra money to spend. I was going to use some of it to buy her the very thing she had been asking for, a big fat color television. My thongy sweetheart knew that I was headed to the mall to pick up our new Panavision, even though she didn't let on. God, I loved her butt. I drove her to the club that morning, and before I left, she slipped me a gram of powder and a couple of reefers to enhance my shopping experience. I got back in my new truck and headed home. I sat on my Kmart couch, turned up the Senya stereo, and sparked up. Man, I was in. I had my own apartment, a drop-dead gorgeous girl, a shiny new truck, a great job, 2 cute kitty cats, and playing for a local rock band. Seriously. I thought I was something. So, I burned the first J I ever smoked, all by myself, in my entire life. And then I got up off the couch to go get that big fat TV. I reached the front door and realized I didn't have my keys. So I went back to the couch to find my keys. Then I realized my keys were in my pocket. So I went back to the front door to leave, and I realized I didn't know where I was going. So I went back and sat down on the couch. I had a relatively long conversation with my oldest cat about their propensity for murdering the neighborhood squirrels. I wanted to illustrate my point by turning on the TV and realizing I didn't have a TV. Then I realized that I was supposed to go to the mall to buy a TV. So I got up off the couch, with my keys in my hand, and made it down to the pickup. I'm not even going to get into how difficult it was for me to get my keys in the ignition and get out of my driveway. I finally, miraculously, make it to the mall. I bought that TV like a boss. I was spending big money, dog, I was a player. I had so many questions that it probably took every single customer service representative in that store to answer them. I think back on it now and realize that they probably all knew I was completely stoned, but they didn't really seem to care because we were all having a good time. It was a real party. I finally made my selection, and a couple of guys loaded it into the back of my truck, and I left the mall, a true hero headed for home. I started to come down a little bit, and so I thought it'd be a good idea to light up another J while I drove home with my girl's big fat TV. I was about halfway through it when it occurred to me that my buddy Pat was painting a car about 4 miles from my house. Being 19 years old, there's nothing better than showing up at your buddy's house with your shiny new truck and big fat TV that your gorgeous stripper fiancé asked you to purchase, right? I get to Pat's house, and he's painting a car in his garage. I like Pat. He's been to my house, and he's seen my girlfriend. I've worked hard alongside this guy for at least a year. Shoveling, graveling, raking, greasing, hydro seeding, and so on. We've busted butts together. And we're pals, so when he asks me to hang out and lend a hand, I agree. I also suggest that we smoke another J, right? Cause that's what friends do, lol. So, we start painting this car in the unventilated garage after having smoked what he thinks is my first J, and then we go into the back of the garage to take a break. And I break out the powder. I want my buddy Pat to know how cool I am and how I've got the hookup because my girl is stripper and, well, you know. I laid out a couple of lines Tony Montana would have taken issue with, and it turns out Pat's got a bottle of Jack as well. We're both so high that we down the bottle of Jack within a few minutes. 10 minutes later, we began to paint like Picasso. Everything is going very well. We're talking our butts off and bonding like 80-year-old siblings separated at birth. We both feel so good about everything that's going on, and everybody we know, and everything is so good and how the car looks so darn good, and suddenly I realize I need to get my butt back to the city and pick up my sweet girl and I'm a half an hour late. And this was in 1998. We couldn't make phone calls back then. So my girl is stranded at this club alone. I told Pat I was late to pick my old lady up from work. He knew where she worked, and he wanted to come along. I thought that was a fantastic idea. We jumped in the truck and headed off to the Cordial Lounge on Lyle Avenue. I ran the red light at a four-way stop at about 60 miles an hour when Pat said he had to go back to the house for something. I made a U-turn in the middle of a rural road and took him back to the house, again blasting the light. He got whatever it was he needed and got back in the truck, and the second time we hit that four-way stop, we were moving at nearly 100 miles an hour. About a mile from that four-way stop was a super sharp curve in front of a judge's house. I never made the curve. Instead, I went straight into the ditch. I collected all 3 yellow and black arrow signs, clipped a telephone pole, and then slammed into the edge of the judge's yard, which acted like a ramp, and hurled my truck 15 feet into the air, and I tagged 3 of the 6 maple trees he had at the front of his very well-maintained yard. 21 years later, you can still drive by that property and see my glorious work. The next thing I remember is a fireman lifting up a piece of canvas and asking me how I was doing. I looked over at him, and I swear to God, I said to him, "I'm doing okay, how are you?" He said to just be patient and relax, they were going to get me out of the truck. I guess I must have passed out at that point because I was kind of disoriented, to say the least. I also couldn't figure out why this guy with the weird hat wanted to get me out of my truck, but whatever. I relaxed. They tell me that my heart stopped twice on the ride to the hospital, and that's why I woke up in the hospital with a bunch of burn marks all over my chest, which was terribly inconvenient, as I have multiple chest tattoos. I woke up in the emergency room with my mother standing over me, asking me if I was okay. And frankly, I was okay. But my mouth felt weird, so I asked her for a mirror. The doctors in the emergency room strenuously objected to her letting me look at my face, and I never did get that mirror. I fussed about how my face felt and how my mouth felt, but they were more concerned about internal injuries and broken leg and broken ankle and blah blah blah. They didn't really seem interested in addressing the fact that my left row of teeth was underneath my tongue and made it a little difficult to speak. About an hour into my emergency room visit, I had the decency to ask them if Pat was okay. They told me that there was no one in the vehicle when I was rescued. I assured them that there was, in fact, a man riding with me, and he was important to me, and I wanted to know where he was. They again assured me there was no one in the vehicle. Being the kind of a-hole that I was, and sometimes still am, I refused any more treatment until they went back and found Pat. Turns out he was hurled out of the vehicle when I hit the grassy knoll, and the weird hats found him. Wandering around in the adjacent cornfield, high as ever, and trying to bum a ride to the cordial lounge, my boy was unscathed.